Welcome to Illinois Lawmakers, weekly coverage of the spring session of the Illinois General Assembly. I'm Jak Tichenor along with Ben Szalinski of our partner organization, Capital News Illinois. Good to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you, Jak.
It's budget making time. Well, it's always budget making time here at the Capitol, but we've been talking for weeks now about how the House and Senate budgeteers are meeting behind the scenes. We know now with a little more specificity about the kind of revenue numbers that they're going to be working with. The legislature's bipartisan committee on forecasting and accountability has some numbers out there for us. So where do things stand?
Yeah, so the latest revision that we got from that commission, COGFA, is that we're looking at about $54.5 billion of revenue for fiscal year 2026. So that's kind of what lawmakers have to work with from an independent estimate. The key thing to note is that's about $500 million less than what Governor Pritzker's office proposed in his budget that he introduced in February. So lawmakers really are kind of in this middle ground right now. They have to figure out, do they want to continue to go forward with what the governor proposed, or do they want to go with a more conservative estimate, especially with even more economic uncertainty since February?
What are you hearing from behind the scenes about how the budgeteers are weighing their options? Because it looks like, for all intents and purposes, if there's less revenue, then you got to kind of pull your horns back on this overall spending plan.
Yeah, there's not a lot of specifics that are coming out. It's a lot of general comments of, well, we're always responsible with our money. We're going to take a close look at all the projections, and ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to pass a balanced budget. So there's not a lot of idea that we really have of exactly which lane they're going to pick right now. But my sense is, especially listening to a lot of appropriations hearings, there have been a lot of questions on both sides of the aisle this year from lawmakers asking about how are you dealing with potential economic uncertainty and a really tight budget.
Has there been any guidance from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, like we saw, for example, late last year before the veto session? There was a memo that went out saying, don't be looking for more money, be looking for the possibility of cuts. Have we heard anything like that?
I think the idea that the governor's continuing to push forward right now remains the same, and that agencies need to be conservative. Lawmakers also need to be conservative about what they're asking for. There hasn't been a lot of changes out of their office. There have been no new projections since the budget was introduced in February, but the governor has continued to reiterate that there's a lot of questions up in the air, and lawmakers do need to be prudent with what they pass.
One of the things that the governor has hinted at is the possibility of the General Assembly maybe coming back into session later on in the year, maybe before the veto session, and that's based on a lot of unknowns at this point. We don't know, for example, what the impact of the Trump tariffs might be on the overall state economy. Illinois has a lot of international trade. It's the fifth largest economy in the United States. So there's so many questions that we have at the moment.
Yeah, it's not usual that we hear the governor actually say that, well, yeah, it's possible we do have to come back. He's taken great pride in being able to pass budgets, which his predecessor struggled to do. He's taken great pride in being able to pass balanced budgets, but as we know, we saw it in 2020 when the pandemic hit. You know, something nationally or globally can happen that can undo a lot of state revenue, and those questions or those gaps are going to need to be filled. And that's where, if something really blows up later on this year or early next year, lawmakers may have to make adjustments to the budget.
And there's a lot of concern in talking with lawmakers here from both parties over the last several weeks that we've been here for the Lawmakers program, that there's a lot of concern over what might happen to the federal Medicaid program. We don't know what, at the moment, what DOGE is going to do. We've heard projections of big cuts that might happen, but so far, again, a lot of question marks.
Yeah, we've seen some small declines in federal revenue coming into the state right now. That's largely because of changes that the state has made to what's reimbursable from the federal government. But the big concern going forward is that there's going to be federal revenue that we've always counted on that's not going to be there.
Ben Szalinski, thank you so much for your insights on Illinois lawmakers. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jak.
Our leadoff guest this week on Illinois Lawmakers is Senate Majority Leader Kimberly Lightford of Westchester, Democrat of Westchester, and all around the Maywood area. Good to see you on this.
Good to see you.
Leader, you're engaged in something right now which is a fundamental overhaul of the way that Illinois funds its public universities. I saw some figures that as recently as the year 2000, state funding for universities covered about 75% of their operations, and now it's down to what, like
35%. Yeah, we've had a 20-year drought where we have not properly funded our higher institutions, and it's beginning to show drastically in the tuition costs falling on the student and the families, preventing a lot of vulnerable students, first-time students, rural students, students from low-income communities, and minority students from actually attaining a degree from one of our universities.
when you look at the situation, as you pointed out, that universities have basically tried to cover those costs by raising tuition, by raising fees and the like, and you sort of kind of hit a ceiling at a point where it's really hard to keep raising them from that point forward over time because you deny access.
We have definitely maxed out over the national average. We're just not looking good at all. The enrollment has dropped by 37% of minority students, and the goal with this funding formula is to create an equitable formula that the universities know what they're getting, when they're receiving it, how much it is. It would better allow them an opportunity to adequately support programs, marketing, all kinds of strategies to increase enrollment at the university.
How does this approach mirror what you and fellow lawmakers did back in 2017 in trying to reform the way K through 12 funding was done? You're basically setting adequacy scores for the schools and then trying to bring up those schools that fall short in funding.
Yes, sir. The schools that are furthest from adequacy would receive a significant support and funding streams of revenue. We did a lot of modeling from the evidence-based funding model that we used in K through 12, but we found that the systems are very different. We spent 4.5 years working on this issue. We had an equitable commission established that gave us some amazing recommendations. All university presidents were a part of the negotiations, and we finally have a funding formula that could put our universities in a place of stability. It could turn around the damage that's causing on families because of the high tuition rates, and it'll set them up to have an opportunity to see the future going forward.
And over time, there would be more money for higher education overall, something on the order of $1.7 billion in new funding over the next, 10 to 15 years?
Yes, sir, that's the goal. The goal is to fund at least $135 million new dollars into the university system over the next 10 years to bring more than half of our universities are functioning below 50% inadequacy, and so it would help to bring those schools up to adequacy in order to perform for the students.
The University of Illinois supports some aspects of this overall plan, but there was opposition last week in a hearing on this, mainly based on the economic impact to U of I over time. They said that the U of I system would only receive about 28% of any new funding under the first year of this program?
Yeah, so all the schools are held harmless. No one will receive less revenue than what they received in the current fiscal year. But based on new funding going into this formula is based on a system of adequacy. Awesome for us that our flagship university is at 89% adequacy, but we'll have Southern Illinois University, for example, or Western or Eastern, who are below 50%. So those schools are more inclined to receive more revenue because they are the furthest away from adequacy than the U of I, Champaign-Urbana. However, the University of Illinois at Springfield and the University at Chicago are also receiving those additional revenues. So in their 3-school system, 2 out of 3 of their schools are going to fare very well.
We've got about 15 seconds left. Where does it stand in the legislative process at this point?
Well, we did have a subject matter hearing so that we can continue to educate members on the subject, and we're hoping to take it to committee for a full vote.
All right, Senator, thank you so much. Senate Majority Leader Kimberly Lightford of Westchester. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Next on Illinois Lawmakers, Assistant Senate Republican Leader Steve McClure of Springfield. Good to have you on the program, sir.
Great to be back, Jack.
Lots of things still kind of hanging fire as we sit here on a Thursday morning in Springfield. We're still waiting on word about what the budgeteers are doing behind the scenes in terms of trying to craft that $55.2 billion budget. We've seen some new figures from the bipartisan committee on government forecasting and accountability as far as revenue projections goes. Those numbers are still off.
They're off. The governor's got to make up for about $1 billion, and he wants to raise all kinds of new taxes. One of the problems with raising new taxes is you lose revenue because people continue to leave our state and therefore take their money with them. So the governor has to be very careful, and it's about time he made some tough decisions instead of trying to put all of this on the backs of our taxpayers.
You mentioned taxes. There are no general tax increases in this in terms of income taxes at the individual or corporate level. Is there anything more specific that would be in that, I suppose, in terms of raising taxes?
There's business taxes, and each new proposal that we've seen from some of these very contentious bills, including PBM reform, which I support PBM reforms, but the current proposal includes a new $15 tax per prescription filled at pharmacies. And so that's going to go on the backs of our taxpayers. That's going to go on the backs of our people that just need to fill the prescriptions and want cheaper drugs.
Are there cuts that Senate Republicans would like to see in this budget proposal as it stands now? What would they be?
The main thing is trying to ensure that we are prioritizing our citizens that are here legally in this country. Governor Pritzker has prioritized free health care for non-citizens. He's walking back that program a bit, but after budget hearings and after dealing with state agencies behind closed doors, it's very apparent that there is still going to be a lot of money that's going to be going to people that are not citizens of our country. And a lot of people in neighborhoods across our state are saying to themselves, you know, I can't pay my bills right now. Inflation's out of control and property taxes are at a record high throughout the country. Illinois is typically seen as either the #1 property taxing state or the second.
I wanted to ask you about another issue that's coming up before lawmakers here at the Capitol. I'm curious about your thoughts about Senate Majority Leader Kimberly Lightford's bill to reform higher education funding, kind of along the lines of what lawmakers did back in 2017 with K through 12 funding. They used an evidence-based model for that. How is that proposal landing as far as the Senate Republicans are concerned?
Well, it's in flux. I mean, it's a process, as you know. But our flagship university, the University of Illinois, where I probably have more of my constituents that attend U of I than any other school, either in Chicago or Springfield or Champaign. And they're against the proposal as it stands right now.
What's wrong with it as far as U of I is concerned? Is there a fiscal hit for the flagship system? Is that the main part?
Well,
is that the main problem?
I would assume that would be the case because obviously their main issue is typically funding every year, and they've got to have enough funding to provide a great education for all of our students. But it also, from their perspective, is a detriment to the rural students, and so that's a problem. And there's also elements of the bill that may not withstand judicial scrutiny, and so we have to be very careful with any legislation that may be thrown out by the courts, particularly when we've got to get, if we can, federal funding and things along those lines. So it's a very delicate situation because our schools need funding and need resources to help them continue to be successful. and this bill may not be the answer quite yet.
So that's still up for discussion. On your personal legislative agenda, you were successful in passing Senate Bill 1256, and the idea of that is to cut red tape for people who need handicap stickers and placards.
That's exactly right. I had a constituent of mine that told me how many times they've got to go into the Secretary of State's office to prove that they're still disabled, even though their disability was permanent. And so this bill allows for that to happen only once every 5 years. So people that are needing those placards and license plates will not have to go into the Secretary of State's offices quite so often.
About a half a minute left. That's already passed the Senate. Where is it in the House at this point?
It's moving. It's on second reading. It's moving forward. I think it's going to pass the House as well.
All right. Assistant Senate Republican Leader Steve McClure of Springfield, thanks very much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Jack.
Up next on Illinois Lawmakers, Assistant Democratic House Majority Leader Jay Hoffman of Swansea joins us. Good to have you back on the program.
Good to see you again, Jack.
Lots going on, of course, both here in Springfield and around the country. I want to kind of kick off the discussion by asking about Scott Air Force Base. How is it faring under the Trump administration and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth? It's the largest employer by far in the area. How are things going?
It's not even close. Not only the individuals who are in the military, but all the civilians that actually work at Scott Air Force Base. I would say that Scott so far hasn't really felt the brunt of some of the cuts. The Defense Department appears to be hanging tough when it comes to funding. You know, not only is Scott Air Force Base unbelievably important to our region, it's incredibly important to the national defense. Without going into some of the concerns I have about the Secretary of the Department of Defense, it's still, I want to just make sure that everyone understands the vital importance of national security that the men and women who work at Scott Air Force Base provide.
You've got everything there from airlift capability to refueling wings, all sorts of things, and that depend on that. I want to turn to energy policy. That's been a major focus of yours over the years here during your time in the Illinois House of Representatives. You were telling me just before we came on that you're part of a working group that's doing some development of new energy policy for the state of Illinois. Can you give us some insights into that?
Well, first of all, I believe it's 3 years ago now, we passed the Clean Energy Jobs Act, CEJA, and that's been begun to be implemented, where we're trying to move away from the reliance on fossil fuels to more renewables, as well as look at potentially small nuclear. However, that hasn't really lived up to its hype. It needs to be updated. And we got to continue to move forward with creating capacity as we see things like data centers begin to build who use huge amounts of energy. And we want to make sure, number one, that the lights stay on, and number two, that in the summer the air conditioning works and the heat works in the winter, and that it's affordable. So what we're attempting to do is do a few things. Number one, provide a framework for battery storage here in Illinois that has happened in other states. We passed just last year the ability to do carbon capture and sequestration, which is going to be hopefully a whole new industry and provide for the capturing of carbon and sequestering literally 5,000 feet into the earth here in Illinois. And the University of Illinois says we have some of the safest geography and geology to be able to do that. So we hope that industry moves forward. We hope we can move forward with energy security, and we can make sure that we have energy storage. We're looking at the issue of transmission. So when you build a wind turbine or you build a solar field, you have to get that onto the grid, and that has to be able to be transmitted. So sometimes these facilities are built in areas where there is no transmission line. So we have to provide for that and make sure that if we build a renewable, it actually gets onto the grid.
So this will be probably at some point part of an omnibus bill?
Yes, so it's the House, the Senate, the governor's office, all working together to try and come up with a comprehensive energy bill that's going to address not only the capacity needs, but affordability and long-term energy efficiency.
In the next minute and a half or so, I want to ask you about reforming the Tier 2 pension system. That's something that affects a lot of people in your district all over the state of Illinois. How close are we now to getting some agreement on making sure that it meets the Social Security Department's standards?
If we don't meet the Social Security Department standards, what's going to happen is the systems are going to be fined, and there's going to be huge amounts of pain, more pain, to the pension system. So whether you're a teacher or a person who works at the Illinois Department of Transportation, the Department of Corrections, or any number of local and state government employees, Tier 2 is really unfair to them, I believe. And so we're trying to reform that and make sure you don't run afoul of the Social Security problem.
Is it likely that that's going to be done here in the next 3 weeks?
Well, I'm working really hard with individuals who represent organized labor, with the pension systems, making sure that they still are viable. So no one wants to retire and not have a pension there because it's no longer viable. So it's kind of a juggling act that we're working through, and I'm really hopeful that we're going to get something done.
We will keep in touch on that. Thank you very much, Assistant Democratic Leader Jay Hoffman of Swansea. Thank you so much.
Good to see you again.
Up next on Illinois Lawmakers, Assistant House Republican Leader Ryan Spain of Peoria. Good to have you on the program again.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
You've been looking into energy issues in recent months, delving into how much Illinois utility customers are paying for electrical service. There's a thing called MISO, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. What is MISO, and what does it do, and how does it play a role in what you and I pay when it comes to our electrical service every month?
Sure. Well, great question. It's a key topic for families right now in Illinois. Of lots of different things, we're making spending decisions here in the state capitol affecting healthcare, education, so many different topics, but energy prices are something that affect all families, all businesses in the state of Illinois. So our state is divided into two different energy regions, with a northern PJM region, it's called, and then about 3/4 of the state is in MISO, the region that you mentioned. And it's in MISO especially that we're very worried about 22-fold price increase in a recent capacity auction. So energy is purchased and procured, especially for the summer season. And what it means is that our families in Illinois that live in the Ameren-MISO territory are going to have massive increases to their monthly energy bill this summer. So as legislators are working to develop another energy package of legislation, we need to be thinking about how we can deliver relief to the families that are going to be very negatively impacted by this energy spike within MISO.
What can the state actually do about that? Because that really comes down to, the public marketplace as far as the cost of electricity.
Well, unfortunately, it's the state's decisions that have really led to this point, because we have much less generation of energy in this territory of MISO for the state of Illinois. So remember, we've got to go back to several major energy initiatives that have taken place in Illinois over the last decade. It started with FIJA, that we've all learned a lot about because it was implicated in the Mike Madigan criminal conviction and bribery associated with ComEd, but included in FIJA, which was passed in 2016, was a massive amount of taxpayer subsidization for nuclear power. It happened again in CEJA, the Climate Equity Jobs Act, a few years later, that we are heavily subsidizing nuclear power in Illinois. And then at the same time, we have been taking off and cutting off the useful life of some of our older coal and gas plants in the state of Illinois. What it means is that we have much less power. We used to be an energy exporting state. Now we're a state within MISO that needs to import energy, and it's very expensive to do so.
How does this relate to other situations that we've seen around the country in recent years, such as Texas had that awful ice storm a couple of years ago, and people were literally freezing to death?
Sure. Texas comes to mind, that had major brownouts a few years ago. And then in my namesake country, although it's just in name only, in Spain, just a few weeks ago, they had massive nationwide blackouts. And it's because we have less reliability in our energy grid. And it's a good thing that we're moving some of our energy production to renewable sources, especially a lot of solar and wind, but they are not reliable energy sources in the same way that some of our legacy power generation. So we do have to have a diversified energy portfolio. And as legislative initiatives and an energy package comes forward for the rest of this legislative session, we've got to make sure it offers some protection to our families who won't be able to deal with these massive price spikes.
Republicans are in the minority in the House of Representatives. What are the prospects that an energy portfolio plan like this can actually get some traction here in the last days of the General Assembly? We've got about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, well, we need to make it a priority, and I think that we have Republicans and Democrats that represent this MISO area, and we are all working together. But we need to remember that the energy policy decisions for the state of Illinois can work out very differently in one region, in the Chicagoland region, versus downstate. And as a proud downstater, I'm going to fight to make sure that our families and businesses aren't put out of business by high energy prices this summer.
Assistant House Republican Leader Ryan Spain of Peoria will stay tuned on that issue and catch up and see where it goes before the end of session. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Illinois Lawmakers continues with Ben Szalinski of Capital News Illinois. I'm Jak Tichenor. Ben, let's take a look forward. We now have the COGFA revenue projections for what we expect to be coming into the state's coffers in the coming year. Last year was really interesting. There was a handful of Democratic lawmakers, moderate Democrats, who had problems with the way that budget was put together. Is there any sense that there might be another mini revolt like that as we come into the final weeks of the session?
Yeah, it certainly seems like we could see that just because lawmakers have so many competing priorities. There's lawmakers who think we need to raise more revenue, we need to be more aggressive with our taxation because there's lots of priorities and programs that are in desperate need of funding. But then there's others who say that we're going too far as how much we're taking from the taxpayers, and that, you know, if we tap into this well too soon, that leaves us with another hole in future years struggling to be able to raise revenue. And that was really the issue last year. So I think whether we see that kind of dissent this year is going to just come down to how well the legislative leaders and the governor can make it clear to Democrats that this is a really challenging budget year and there is just not room for debate over big spending increases and new programs.
We've got about a half a minute left. Is this budget going to be like is it going to be dropped at the last minute like it usually happens around here?
It certainly seems that way. We're, about 3 weeks left here in session. You know, the last day is a Saturday, May 31st. So lawmakers are going to need, especially if there's not more than 70 votes on the budget, they're going to need to pass something before midnight that day.
Could be some long nights. Thanks so much, Ben Szalinski of Capital News Illinois.
Thank you, Jack.